I never thought that a simple camping trip with friends could turn into a nightmare. It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway, a chance to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. But everything changed when we stumbled upon an abandoned cabin in the woods. It was a warm summer evening when we arrived at the campsite. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the trees and creating a peaceful atmosphere. We set up our tents and started a campfire, enjoying some drinks and laughter around the crackling flames. But as the night grew darker, we heard strange noises coming from the woods. At first, we shrugged it off as just some animals, but as the noises grew louder and more frequent, we couldn't ignore it any longer. We started to feel uneasy and decided to call it a night. We retreated to our tents, hoping for a peaceful night's sleep. But as soon as I closed my eyes, I heard a blood-curdling scream. I jumped up, my heart racing with fear. I unzipped my tent and saw my friends gathered around something in the distance. As I got closer, I saw that they were surrounding an old abandoned cabin. "What are you all doing here?" I asked, still shaken from the scream. "We heard someone screaming," my friend Sora replied, her voice trembling. We cautiously approached the cabin and saw that the door was slightly ajar. Against our better judgment, we decided to investigate. The inside of the cabin was dark and musty, with old furniture covered in cobwebs. We searched the rooms, but there was no sign of anyone. That's when we heard another scream, this time coming from outside. We rushed back outside and realized that one of our friends, Jake, was missing. We called out his name, but there was no answer. Panic set in as we realized that we lost our friend. As we frantically searched for Jake inside the house, we heard more strange noises and saw eerie sightings in the darkness. We were being watched, and it felt like something sinister was lurking in the house. We stuck together, trying to stay calm and find our missing friend, but the night was far from over. As we continued our search, we stumbled upon a hidden room in the cabin. Inside, we found old newspaper clippings and photos that sent chills down our spines. They were all about a family who used to live in the cabin, but they disappeared without a trace. The last photo was of a family of 4, and one of the family members looked eerily similar to Jake. Before we could process this new information, we heard Jake's voice calling out to us. We followed the sound and found him tied up in the dark basement of the cabin. We quickly untied him, and he told us that he was grabbed by someone or something while he running out of the cabin. We knew we had to leave there immediately, but as we turned to go, we saw a figure standing in the shadows of the basement. It was tall and slender, with glowing red eyes. We all froze in fear as it lunged towards us. We ran as fast as we could, not looking back until we reached the safety of our campsite. We packed up our things and left the woods, never looking back. We never spoke of that night again, but the memory of the abandoned cabin will haunt us forever. To this day, I don't know what we encountered in those woods. Was it the ghost of the missing family, or was it something even more sinister? All I know is that I will never go camping again, and if you ever stumble upon an abandoned cabin in the woods, do yourself a favor and stay far, far away. I always loved going on camping trips with my friends. We would pack our bags, load up the car, and head out to different secluded locations, away from the daily battles of modern human life. Our annual camping trip was something we all looked forward to. And this year, we had chosen to camp in a remote forest that was known for its beautiful hiking trails and breathtaking views. As we arrived at our campsite, we were greeted by the warm sun and the peaceful sounds of nature. We quickly set up our tents and started a fire, ready to spend the weekend roasting marshmallows and telling scary stories. Little did we know, our weekend of fun and relaxation was about to turn into a real scary story. As the sun began to set and darkness started to creep in, the weather suddenly changed and the early spring breeze turned cold. Even my friends noticed it, but we obviously brushed it off and continued to enjoy our evening. After eating a bunch of snacks and drinking some beer by the fire, I felt the urge to pee, so I got up, announcing that I had to take a leak to my group of friends. I heard one of them yelling at me to not get lost, because if I did, no one would come to find me. Prick, I whispered to myself as I was laughing. After getting about 10 feet away from the fire and a right turn, I decided to stop and get to my business, since I genuinely feared the thought of getting lost at the age of 22 and being reminded of the embarrassment for the rest of my life. As I was zipping my pants back up, I heard something move behind the bushes a few inches from me. Startled by the sound, I slowly backed away, threatened that it might be a bear or something. I turned away to head back, only to see the most horrifying sight of my life. A black humanoid figure crouched down with its head tilted to the left, peering at me from behind the bushes. I felt as if time froze and I was trapped in one of my childhood nightmares. My heart was pounding out of my chest, and by the time I started running, the figure had begun to let out a disgusting growl. I kept looking over my shoulder, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. When I got to my friends, I was screaming, telling them about the thing I saw when I'd gone further away to take a leak. I could tell that they were slowly starting to panic. We were all wondering if we should just get in the car and head back, or spend the night inside our tents, because it would be too risky to leave at night. Suddenly, we heard a blood-curdling scream. We all jumped up in fear and ran to our tents, thinking they could protect us from whatever's out there. But suddenly, everything went silent, and then we heard it. Strange footsteps echoing. Frozen in fear, I held my breath in, not making a single sound. The night felt never-ending, and we were too afraid to sleep. We could hear scratching and tapping on our tents, and every time we looked outside, we could see the figure standing just out of reach of our flashlights. As the sun finally started to rise, we mustered up the courage to leave our tents and pack up our things. We were all shaken and exhausted, but we knew we had to get out of the forest as soon as possible. As we were leaving, we came across a park ranger who told us that there had been numerous reports of strange occurrences and sightings in this forest. He said that we were lucky to have made it out alive, as many others have not been so fortunate. We couldn't believe what we had just experienced. Our peaceful camping trip had turned into a nightmare, and we were lucky to have survived. We never went back to that forest, and we never spoke of that terrifying night again. From that day on, I was always on edge whenever I went camping. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was always watching me. And every time I heard strange noises in the woods, I couldn't help but wonder if it was the same figure that we encountered that night. That camping trip will forever be etched in my memory. And still sometimes, when I find it hard to sleep, I see it, peeking out with his head tilted to the left, smiling. I never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural. I always thought they were just myths or stories to scare children. That was until my friends and I decided to go on a camping trip at the nearby national park. It all started when we read a local news article about a group of campers who disappeared without a trace during a weekend trip at the same location. The article was filled with eerie details and speculation of what could have happened to the missing campers. Some believed they were attacked by a wild animal, while others claimed it was the work of a serial killer. But one thing was for sure: it sent shivers down our spines and sparked our curiosity. My friends and I, being the adrenaline junkies that we are, decided to challenge our fears and go on a camping trip at the same location. We were convinced that the news article was just a hoax and nothing would happen to us. Little did we know, we were in for the true scary camping trip horror. As we arrived at the national park, we were greeted with lush greenery and a peaceful atmosphere. It was hard to believe that something sinister could have happened here. We set up our tents and gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing scary stories. We laughed and joked, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that lingered in the air. As the night approached, we retreated to our tents and settled in for the night. The darkness surrounded us, and the only source of light was the dim glow of our flashlights. I couldn't help but feel a bit tense, as if I was being watched. I tried to think of it as my overactive imagination, but then strange things started to happen. I heard footsteps outside my tent, but when I unzipped the entrance, there was no one there. I thought it was one of my friends trying to prank me, but they were all asleep. Then I heard whispers, faint at first, but getting louder and more distinct as the night went on. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but it sent chills down my spine. I woke up my friends and we all huddled together in one tent, trying to calm each other's fears. But the strange occurrences didn't stop there. We heard rustling in the bushes, as if someone was lurking around our campsite. We saw shadows moving in the darkness, but when we shone our flashlights, there was no one there. We even heard a blood-curdling scream that made our hearts race with fear. We were convinced that someone or something was watching us. We thought of packing up and leaving, but we were too afraid to leave the safety of our tents. We tried calling for help, but our phones had no signal. It was as if we were trapped in our own personal horror movie. As the night dragged on, we huddled together, too afraid to close our eyes. That's when we saw it, something standing outside our tents. It was tall and slender, with glowing white eyes and a twisted smile. We screamed and scrambled to get out of our tents, but the figure disappeared into thin air. We didn't waste any more time. We quickly packed our things and ran out of there. As we drove away, we saw flashing lights and heard sirens. The police had arrived to investigate the disappearance of the missing campers. We never went back to that national park, and we never spoke of what happened that night. To this day, I still can't explain the strange and terrifying occurrences that we experienced. Was it the spirits of the missing campers trying to communicate with us? Or was it something more sinister, lurking in the darkness of the national park? One thing is for sure, I will never underestimate the power of the supernatural again, and I will always remember the true scary camping trip horror that my friends and I encountered, a night that will forever haunt our memories.